There is a certain kind of person who, in the middle of an otherwise completely unremarkable conversation about something entirely unrelated, will pause and say something like, "Did you know that the total weight of all ants on Earth is roughly equal to the total weight of all humans?" And the person across from them will blink, and there will be a brief silence, and then life will continue as normal. But for the person who said it, something small and satisfying just happened. Something that is very difficult to explain to anyone who doesn't already understand it from the inside. You have been carrying that fact since you were maybe 12 years old. You have never once been asked for it. Nobody has ever needed it. It has contributed nothing measurable to your professional output or your social standing or your practical navigation of daily adult life. And yet there it sits, perfectly intact, completely accessible, sharp and clear as the day it arrived. While you cannot recall what you had for lunch 3 days ago or where you left the thing you were just holding. That contrast, the specific absurdity of it, is worth sitting with. Because it is not actually absurd. It is telling you something specific and accurate about how your mind was built and what it quietly values. And most people who live with this particular kind of memory have never had it explained to them in a way that felt true. The usual framing is some version of a compliment that lands slightly sideways. Oh, you know, the most random things. Or you are full of useless trivia. Or you should go on a game show. All of which are affectionate and all of which slightly miss the actual point, which is that nothing your brain holds onto is random, and nothing it keeps is useless in the way that word implies. The words random and useless suggest the information got in by accident, the way lint collects in a pocket, and that it has no real relationship to the person carrying it. Neither of those things is true, and the reason they are not true is genuinely worth understanding. Here is what is actually happening. What we are really talking about is a specific and documentable relationship with curiosity, novelty, and the way certain nervous systems respond to the world encountering something unexpected. And there is significantly more going on underneath it than most people realize. Memory in the way most of us were taught to think about it is completely wrong. The model most people carry around, that the brain stores information based on its importance or its frequency, or how hard you tried to learn it, does not match what neuroscience actually shows. The brain does not file information based on usefulness. It tags information based on the emotional and neurological response that was present in the moment of encounter. Specifically, it pays attention to two things with particular intensity: emotional charge and novelty. The degree to which something surprised you, delighted you, unsettled you, or violated your existing expectations of how the world works is one of the primary determinants of whether it gets retained or quietly discarded within a few days. This is why the ant weight fact stuck when it did. Something in you, at whatever age you first encountered it, had a response that was essentially wait, that cannot be right. A small internal recalibration. A brief moment where your model of the world had to make room for something it was not expecting. The hippocampus, which plays a central role in memory formation, is particularly responsive to novelty. It has evolved to flag unexpected information as potentially significant because, from a very old evolutionary standpoint, unexpected things are the things that required attention and adaptation. The brain does not know the difference between a genuinely consequential surprise and a purely intellectual one. It just knows something broke the pattern, and it logs accordingly. Research published out of UC Davis found something that expands this considerably. Participants in a state of genuine curiosity showed not only improved memory for the material they were curious about, but also significantly better retention for completely unrelated information they encountered during that same curious state. Faces of strangers, incidental details, things that had nothing to do with whatever sparked the curiosity in the first place. The curious brain, it turns out, opens something like a wider aperture on everything around it. More gets in, more sticks. This means that people who move through the world in a more or less continuous state of mild curiosity, which is a real and documentable personality orientation, are not just collecting more interesting facts. They're operating with a memory system that is structurally more receptive because the state they are most often in is precisely the state in which the brain retains most efficiently. This connects to a well-established dimension in personality, psychology called openness to experience. People who score high on this trait find novelty genuinely rewarding rather than draining or threatening. They experience the discovery of an unexpected piece of information the way other people experience the resolution of something uncomfortable, as a satisfaction, a small completion, a reward. And this is not a metaphor. The dopamine response to encountering novel information that confirms or expands one's model of the world is measurable and real. The reward circuit fires, not because the person decided to be interested, because the brain is wired to respond to certain kinds of incoming information the way other brains respond to other kinds of stimuli. It is not a choice any more than finding a particular kind of music moving is a choice. Now root this in how people actually develop, because this is where it stops being just neuroscience and starts being personal history. The people who carry the largest and most specific collections of unusual knowledge are almost always people who, at some point relatively early in their lives, discovered that the world was stranger and more intricate than it first appeared, and had a response to that discovery that was something close to relief. For some children, the world is large and overwhelming, and the strangeness of it is a source of anxiety. For others, and this is the critical distinction, the strangeness is a source of orientation. The fact that octopuses have 3 hearts, that there is a word for the smell of rain, that certain stars visible in the night sky no longer exist, and we are looking at light from something already gone. These are not unsettling discoveries. They are grounding ones. They make the world feel more itself, more real, more worthy of the attention being paid to it. For many people who remember random facts compulsively, this orientation was present from early childhood and was in many cases the primary way they made sense of and felt comfortable within a world that was otherwise large and somewhat unpredictable. Curiosity, as a disposition, is partly temperament and partly a response to environment. Children who found early that asking questions and pursuing unexpected information was rewarding, socially, emotionally, intellectually, tend to develop nervous systems that are tuned toward that reward on an ongoing basis. The fact collecting is not incidental. It is the accumulated evidence of a mind that learned early that the world repays close attention with something that feels like delight. And here is where it becomes worth stating clearly. Because this particular trait tends to receive a very specific and slightly deflating social response. It is not better or worse than other ways of being oriented toward information. There are people whose minds work differently, who retain procedural knowledge with extraordinary efficiency, who remember faces and names and the emotional texture of conversations with a depth that fact collectors often envy. No orientation is the complete package. The brain that retains the weight of ants and the depth of Cleopatra's historical proximity to the moon landing is the same brain that sometimes cannot remember whether it took its medication this morning or whether it confirmed a meeting that was supposed to happen today. The retrieval strengths go together with the retrieval gaps. This is not a failure mode. It is a specific architecture with specific characteristics in both directions. Here is the counterintuitive layer that most people in this category have never quite consciously articulated about themselves. The facts you carry are not random. They never were. Go back through your own catalog of the things you know that nobody ever asked you to know and look at the shape of it. There is almost certainly a pattern there that says something accurate about what you were oriented toward, what you found beautiful or unsettling or astonishing. What made the world feel larger or more mysterious or more worth inhabiting? The people who remember a disproportionate number of facts about the scale of the universe tend to be people who have always been drawn to questions about magnitude and their own position within it. The people whose facts cluster around animals and biology tend to be people who have always found other forms of consciousness and other ways of being alive quietly fascinating. The people whose facts lean toward history and the strangeness of how the present emerged from a very different past tend to be people who think in long time frames and find context meaningful rather than merely informative. The facts are not a random collection. They are a self-portrait assembled without intention over years from the moments when reality briefly exceeded your expectations of it. There's also a social dimension here that deserves honest attention because it cuts in more than one direction. Sharing a strange, true thing with another person is a particular kind of social gesture. It is an invitation more than it is a demonstration. It is the offering of a small experience of the world being briefly more interesting than it was a moment ago, extended to another person in the hope that they will receive it the way it is meant. Did you know that a group of flamingos is called a flamboyance? Did you know that there is a lake in Africa so alkaline it calcifies animals that fall into it, turning them into salt sculptures? Did you know that the inventor of the Pringles can is buried in one? These are not facts deployed to establish superiority. They are attempts at a very specific kind of connection. The connection that happens when two people briefly share the experience of the world being stranger and more interesting than either of them expected. The people who do this most naturally and most persistently are often the people who, at some point, got very excited about something they discovered and were met with a version of "that's enough." Too much. No one needed to know that. And they kept doing it anyway because the alternative, performing disinterest in a world this consistently astonishing, simply never made sense to them. None of this needs to be fixed. None of it was ever broken. The mind that retains the weight of ants and the proximity of Cleopatra to the moon landing and the name of the chemical compound that gives rain its smell is not a mind that is misfiling its priorities. It is a mind that has been paying attention to a particular layer of reality, the layer where things reveal themselves to be stranger and more intricate than they present. the layer where ordinary facts turn out to be extraordinary ones once you know enough context, and has been accumulating the evidence of that attention for years. That evidence is not trivia in the dismissive sense. It is the record of a mind that has been genuinely, continuously, somewhat involuntarily, engaged with the question of what the world actually is underneath the surface, of how it appears on a normal afternoon. The person who mentions at dinner that a day on Venus is longer than a year on Venus, and then watches the table go briefly quiet, is not malfunctioning. They are not filtering incorrectly or misallocating cognitive resources, or failing to distinguish important from unimportant. They are the person who found out how time works on another planet and felt something about it. Something that registered as genuinely significant in the only way the brain has available to record significance. With memory. With retention. With a small permanent flag that says this one was worth keeping. If something in this landed with a specificity that felt less like a general observation and more like an accurate description of something you have been living for a long time, that is not an accident. The way your memory works is connected to something larger about how you are oriented toward experience, toward other people, toward attention itself. There is a whole architecture underneath the fact about the ants. And if you are curious about what the rest of it looks like, which you probably are because that is the kind of person you are, there is more here worth exploring. Dear viewer, if you found value in this video, like it and share it with friends and family. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the bell icon so that you will be notified every time we upload a new video. Thank you for watching until the end. We will see you in our next video. Until then, stay safe and stay blessed.